Hello, welcome to another drawing session. Today we're getting to look at drawing from life, getting inspiration from little things, small things that we might find around the house, in our gardens, or even on a short walk somewhere. So there's plenty to inspire us from nature. I know personally, I love spiral shapes, I love leaf, organic, spreading veins, the detail of things like shells. And in front of me here, I just have a little collection of things that I've had and I found on walks or just outside. There's some beautiful small objects, and sometimes the smaller is better because it makes us look more closely at things, and the more we look at something, the more we have to look at it, the better we understand it. And so to start with, we might begin with just this little shell here. I quite love the contrast in this shell. You can see that there. It's got some really nice white highlights and some darker areas around the rim. I can set that up on my on my table, and I just want to use a really simple range of materials for this one. So pretty much just pencil, charcoal, and an eraser. And if you're feeling really excited, maybe some Q-tips instead of our smudge sticks. So to begin, we think about looking at this object, looking at it all over, really getting a sense of what it is, how it looks, how it shines, where the light is coming from, looking all around and deciding on the best angle that we want to look at it from. So we're going to have a very close look. And then we decide on how large on our paper our composition is going to be. So if you've got a piece of A3 like this, you could do a series of small sketches and studies from different angles. You could do one over here and one here and maybe a bigger one over here. But for the sake of simplicity, we just want to quickly sketch out. And this is not the only way to do it. Okay, this is just a guide. There's no rules really with how you decide to sketch it out or how you decide to lay it out. You can lay it out with pen, you can lay it out with charcoal straight away. I find it's just a little bit helpful so that I know the entirety of my shape is going to fit in one area and create a nice sort of solid composition there. So that's pretty good. If you're not happy with it, you can always erase parts of it if you think that's a bit too heavy or you don't want to double up your line work. That's all right. Now coming to the inner forms, all of these individual lines, all of these sort of spiral shapes, well not spiral shapes, but curved lines. And this is where if you want to warm up, you can do a series of curved lines just over and over again on a piece of paper. Just keep doing those points. So to give you an example of a warm-up, just very quickly, if you do 2 points on a page, do a couple like that, then you just want to do a straight, solid curve between the two. You want to get as close to that second point as you can. And so the more you do it, even if you go underneath, the more natural it'll feel, the easier it will get. Just doing that same curved line. What we're trying to avoid is that sort of thing, where you start to overthink your gestures, you start to overthink how your line is going to look, and you start to go a bit wonky. So the idea is that if something is smooth and has a beautiful natural smooth curve, that you can replicate that just with that practice, just with that warm-up. So back to our drawing here. We've got some nice lines happening on the surface. And these are really small in here, so they're super small, so I might not even worry about them for right now. Just a general guide for myself. And really looking now at the darker areas at the back, how many little lines fade into a lighter area. So I've got the general layout of my shell now, and I can start to come back over the top again with a new layer of charcoal. So looking at the darkest areas and then keeping in mind where the lightest areas are. That way our drawing is going to have beautiful contrast. It's going to have a really nice natural balance of light and dark. So you don't want to go too dark all at once, but I'm going to start just with the shadow underneath because I know that's really going to be my darkest area. And when you can get really crazy with this, and you can just start to smudge almost straight away. Just see how far that charcoal is going to stretch on that paper. And if you want a bit more, this is a sort of semi-compressed, this is a medium charcoal. So I've got a medium and a soft here, and that's really all you'll ever need, unless you want to do some really fine line work. The hard is better for that because it'll create that definition on the paper. So I'm just edging around, I'm looking at where my darkest lines are inside my shell now a little bit. Creating those. This is beautiful. And then as I get to the top, starting to see where they fade into that lighter area, and there's a little band of those lines around the top, and there's quite a few more, but I'm just doing this quite quickly to give you an idea of how we can then spread those out, create that contrast, and then come back again once we rub that in, get some nice happening there. We'll come back up the back here, around that side, almost coming that way. So I'm make that as rough as I want to, just using my fingers at this stage. You can use these Q-tips as well. They create a nice extended line as well. You can get a bit more definition in your line with something pointed like this. So we're starting to see that become more three-dimensional, becoming more of a form. I'm going to add a bit more shadow underneath here where I can see it on the paper. And this is just about practice and experimentation, having fun, because we have a secret weapon here. This eraser will get rid of any unnecessary or unwanted darkness with that charcoal. We can even create little areas, little layers of highlights, and that's going to come in handy. Once I start, I might just give that a good whack of darkness in there, and a little bit up the back here. Get it all mixed in. So we're getting some mid-tones now, getting that medium, medium area. Just a bit more in there. And what you'll find is that to create that definition, where we see highlights, we can then go back in with that eraser. And the sharper it is, you can sharpen it with scissors, or you can cut it up into pieces so you've got a few nice pieces to work with. We're going to start to peel back some of that charcoal work so that we have some nice highlight areas. Yeah, all the way to the end, so that our mid-tones are a little bit separated by areas just of white paper, and that's giving us that lovely balance, that contrast on the page between light and dark. So the detail work is starting to get more and more complex. We can just keep looking at our object for the truth of it. Always look back to your object. It reveals everything to you. Don't become too predisposed with what's on the paper. If you start to look at your paper too long, you start to make things up. Really, all of the truth, as I say, is right there in front of you. If you keep looking back at it, you can't go wrong. You're just going to find where those lines are and look for those details. Pay attention to the truth of the object. You can't go wrong. And this can take, a drawing like this, it's just a study, but it can take 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long you like, until you feel comfortable with how it's shaping up. And as I say, these kinds of objects are all around us. They're not hard to find. They don't have to be big compositions, still lifes with, plates and bowls and fruit and, 10 different elements. They can simply be one object that we're looking at very closely to give us that focus, to give us that refinement. So, starting to come back, I can come back with my 4B pencil. It's a mid-dark, mid-black type range, and then I can add some of those more little tiny detailed lines of the shell. I can really push them out. So I'm adding it, not a full black, just some more definition in there. You can use the tip or the flat sort of side of the pencil. That'll give you a different texture as well. And we're filling in this shell, looking back at it all the time. And if I was to spend half an hour or an hour on this, I'd start to really develop my detail in this shell, because there's a lot going on just in this tiny object that I'm not quite capturing exactly. But that's okay. For a quick sketch, for something that we just want to practice with, this is really good. Now these still too light, so I'm going to come back in with some charcoal. If you want to break your charcoal into little pieces, that gives you a nice working flat edge of the charcoal there. Makes it a little bit easier to control where your highlights and your midtones and dark tones are going to. So yeah, I'm going to go back there, and there, and there, and then with our eraser, a bit of smudge work. That's looking a little bit better. It's just in those little highlights. Even if we use the sharpest side of that eraser now, just giving ourselves that beautiful balance, which is the truth of the object. There's those little highlights inside the shell there. So just working it layer by layer, looking, reworking, finding it, going back, going forward, seeing where things aren't quite balanced, because you can always keep going with this material, with these charcoals and pencils. Excuse me. Now there's a little bit more shadow in here I want to create, just by the side edge. There's a very sharp, sort of defined shadow there that fades into that. And then to soften it out, you can use the more soft side of that eraser just to make it, just to smooth it. So really, as I mentioned previously, the eraser is not just for mistakes. It is a tool on itself. It will help you to create those beautiful detailed definition lines to produce that contrast within a drawing like this. There's a range of different objects that you can become inspired by. I found these just around my house or down at the beach. There's rocks, leaves, things of natural phenomenon that just occur in our backyard. The other thing is, if you're feeling hungry at the time that you start a project like this, popcorn is an ideal food because it's so varied. It's varied. It's got a lot of contrast, a lot of highlights and darker areas. So you can pick a piece that you like, put it on the table, and then snack on the rest while you're drawing. You can't lose. See you next time.